Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Beyond Horizons. In the last episode we sent Nebula up to Tavern 3, taking some tourists up there so they can spend a bit of time, but we had a little trouble with the electric charge. So I thought better leave the hotel at a time where, you know, we get good solar coverage because we don't want to run out of electric charge. And as we swing around the dark side of the moon, we notice, we're in the middle of a solar eclipse. This turned out to be, a huge problem. You can see my electric charge isn't doing very well there. So I make my escape burn early so that I can run the engines and, you know, use the alternators within them to just make a little bit of electric charge back. I said in the last episode that when you run out of electric charge, you only have a few minutes before you run out of life support. That's actually not true. You have a few hours, so basically, because the electric charge has run out, you're not pumping new oxygen into any of the cabins, so you're basically just using up the oxygen that's already in there, which takes a few hours, but I really didn't want to risk it. So here what you can see me doing is basically pointing forwards and backwards and firing my engines over and over. I've cut out most of it because I did that for about 10 minutes, just to keep the electric charge, you know, high enough. We did actually run out a couple of times, but eventually we make it past the solar eclipse and we head back down, using up about half of our fuel doing that, by the way. And because it took so much of the return fuel to charge the batteries, I didn't have enough for a circularization, so here we're going to be aero braking instead. Which I was a bit tentative about because I have to stow these solar panels when I'm doing this, and I was just worried I was going to run out of electric charge. You can see it does deplete very fast, so we're absolutely going to have to take a look at the power production of this vessel before we launch it again, especially if we're going to be putting tourists back in it. I think I'm going to use fuel cells because all I really need to add is a hydrogen tank, and then that way we have, you know, decent power production even when we're on the dark side. Also, I don't really want to mess up the aerodynamics too much by adding loads more solar panels. So yeah, I think that's how I'm going to be doing that. Anyway, we're coming in for our second aero brake here. And luckily we can just pancake through the atmosphere and really quickly bring the apoaps back down. And from here I have enough fuel to do some circularization, so we just raise the periaps a little bit, swing back round, and make a nice circular orbit in a, you know, low altitude, and this way we can pick our landing site. Still having a bit of trouble with the electric charge, of course, and unfortunately it's morning at the Space Center, which means we're going to be doing most of our re-entry in the dark. So here I am just angling the solar panels to the sun to make sure we just make up as much charge as possible so that we don't run out, essentially. I also block out some of the electric charge in the command module here, and I'm doing that just in case we do run out of electric charge during re-entry. We still have a little bit to deploy the landing gear, which is a lesson I learned from the Hyperion, where I had a very similar issue with the electric charge, meaning I couldn't deploy the landing gear. The problems didn't really stop with the electric charge. The re-entry was fine, but I was really struggling to stay on target. As always, my space planes tend to glide quite a lot while re-entering the atmosphere, meaning I gain a lot of extra range, and there I am overshooting the Space Center once again. I tried to turn this thing around. Really, if I'd been sensible, I would have turned the other way and aimed for the island runway, but I didn't really think about that until it was too late. And yeah, you can see we're way too far away, so I'm just going to put it down in the ocean. And I hit the water way too hard and everybody loses consciousness. So we might be offering some refunds on that one. Anyway, on to the main topic of today's video. Here we have SSTO Astatine, which is my automated cargo SSTO that I used for the construction of the lunar base a few episodes ago. And you can see here I am immediately turning north. The payload that this SSTO is delivering is some communication satellites, which I'm going to put in a very high polar orbit, because we have some connectivity issues with the probes headed towards the outer solar system, so I thought I'd just bolster the network with some more up-to-date probes that are sitting in a very high orbit, and hopefully that should give us some better range on our communications network. Plus, it's an excuse to use this beautiful SSTO once again. Since I debuted this plane in a cinematic, I haven't really had the chance to talk about it, so let's do that now. Say hello to SSTO Astatine. I named it Astatine because I thought of it as the bismuth's big brother, so I wanted to give it another chemical name. Turns out astatine is the rarest naturally occurring element in Earth's crust, and it's so rare because the most stable isotopes have a half-life of about 8 hours, making it so radioactive that it basically melts itself, which is why we've never actually seen a macroscopic specimen of the stuff. Now, don't let the size of this space plane fool you. It doesn't have terrific cargo capabilities because it was originally designed for the shipping containers that are destined for Omega Base on the moon, and they're not very heavy. So this is more suited towards lighter payloads that are just an awkward size and shape, like the delivery vehicle of the comms network we are deploying now. And there we are, deploying the polar satellites, destined for high Kerbin orbit. I forgot to put solar panels on the main delivery vehicle for some reason, so we're just having to use the ones on the top probe there. So if you have a quick look at the comms network, you can see the Echo probe and Demeter. They have connection to the Space Center, but they are getting weaker as they get further out, so yeah, hopefully these two probes will fix that. And if that doesn't work, we might have to send some communication probes out on solar orbit. Maybe head down to maybe sort of Moho sort of area, because then, you know, it'll be closest to pretty much all planets at all times. That's actually quite an interesting little phenomena that we see in our own solar system. So if you take any planet in the solar system other than Mercury and you look at whichever planet is closest to that one, statistically it's going to be Mercury, and that's because it's on the lowest orbit around the sun, which means it spends not very long away from any one planet. So yeah, it's hard to explain. I think you kind of need a diagram, but I go look it up. It's very interesting. Anyway, here we are returning the Astatine. Now, the problem with polar orbits is twofold. A, it's kind of harder to come back directly at the Space Center because the planet is rotating underneath us. Also, it's a little bit dicey with the re-entry heating because we're actually coming in a higher relative velocity to the atmosphere, but luckily we don't actually have a problem with that this time. And we're coming down pretty much on the desert runway, and I managed to get, well, pretty much dead on. Now, I'm a little high and fast for the runway, but luckily there's no tourists on this space plane, so I can just do a little nosedive into the ground. I had to do a bit of fuel rebalancing there, just so I didn't, you know, stall and lose control of the plane. And doing some S maneuvers just so we can not pick up too much speed as we basically plummet towards the ground. I realise here that I'm a little too close to the runway to pull out nicely from the dive and line myself up, so I just do a quick little U-turn just so I can give myself a good line up for the runway. It also helps to have engines on the thing so I don't have to glide back to the runway because, yeah, I didn't quite have enough energy and I cut the engines out a little too early and I end up landing just before the runway. Yeah, just like that. Luckily, the ramp up to the runway isn't too steep and so we can put it down nice and gently. But yeah, there's the Astatine. I love this spaceplane, even if it's not hugely useful. Anyway, back to the polar satellites on their way up to their apoapse, which is around 70,000 kilometers, right on the edge of the sphere of influence of Kerbin. We circularize the orbit. Now here, I'm using the flight engineer to put it into an exactly 90-day orbital period. And the reason I want to be so precise is so that when we lower the periaps of the delivery vehicle so we can put the other probe on the other side of the orbit, we know exactly how long that orbit needs to be. Namely 45 days, so here we are moving it down into a 45-day orbit. So that way when we reach our apoapse again, the other polar satellite that we just deployed will be on the exact opposite side of the orbital path. I mean, it doesn't actually have to be that precise because they're not on an equatorial orbit, so it's not hugely important that they stay that in phase, but I would like them to be as in phase as possible. Anyway, I completely forgot to record the circularization of the second polar satellite, but here we are with the final network. It slightly improved the connection to the outer probes. I think I am going to have to send out some solar communication satellites, but we'll worry about that later. For now, as I said, I forgot to put any kind of solar panels on the delivery probe, so I thought there's no point trying to rescue it, we might as well just have some fireworks. And it goes out in a blaze of glory in Kerbin's upper atmosphere, not even a trace of it left to reach the surface. But that's all I've got for today's episode, so if you liked it, please consider leaving a like and maybe even subscribing to the channel. And if you want to check out older episodes of this series, you can check out the playlist that's on screen now. But I've been Moonfish1001, and I will see you in the next video.